10 Black historical figures the history books ignore. 10. Elizabeth Jennings. In 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks refused to vacate a seat in the colored section of a bus. She became famous as a result and is world-renowned. But she wasn't the first to take a stand against segregation on an American bus. 9 months before her, 15-year-old Claudette Colvin was arrested, also in Montgomery, Alabama, for refusing to give up her seat to a white woman. But she wasn't the first either. 11 years before Colvin, on July 16, 1944, Irene Morgan Kirkcaldy was arrested in Virginia for refusing to give up her seat in the white section, and even though you may never have heard of her, she still wasn't the first. On Sunday, July 16, 1854, 27-year-old Elizabeth Jennings was late for church and boarded a whites-only streetcar. After a struggle with the conductor, she was forced off with the help of a policeman. She won the subsequent lawsuit against the railway company. The court ordered all New York cars be desegregated and awarded her the equivalent of $10,000. The lawyer that represented her was Chester A. Arthur, future President of the United States. Parks, Colvin, and Kirkcaldy all also won in court, but neither Alabama nor Virginia enforced the rulings. New York did. 9. Matthew Henson. If you look up first to reach the North Pole, you will find the achievement to be officially credited to Robert Peary. His claim is disputed, but if his party did make it first, he was not the first in his party to actually get there. That honor belongs to Matthew Henson, who had been sent by Peary to scout the route. When they overshot what they thought was the position of the pole, they retraced their steps to the target, and it was clear Henson had passed it first. Henson was also the person to plant the American flag at the point they believed was the North Pole. In a later interview, Henson said, "I was in the lead that had overshot the mark a couple of miles. We went back and I could see that my footprints were the first at the spot." 8. Lewis Latimer. Louis Howard Latimer was an American inventor and patent draftsman. He was the son of runaway slaves and fought in the U.S. Navy during the Civil War. Among his inventions were an improved toilet for trains, a safety elevator, and a forerunner to air conditioning. He also created the patent application for Alexander Graham Bell for the telephone. His most important invention, though, is something that is mostly unknown. When Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, it had two major drawbacks. It was expensive and had a short lifespan. The drawbacks were a result of how the filament was made, which meant the invention was unlikely to succeed. It was Latimer that devised a solution, encasing the filament in a cardboard envelope, stopping it from breaking. This solution made the bulbs cheaper, longer lasting, and more efficient. This change led to them being installed in homes and streets. In 1918, he was named one of the charter members of the Edison Pioneers, a group of 100 people deemed responsible for creating the electrical industry. 7. James Armistead Lafayette. James Lafayette was an enslaved man in 1781 when he managed to convince his enslaver to allow him to join the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War. Serving under the Marquis de Lafayette as a spy, he was able to gather info from the British, posing as a runaway slave. His information was instrumental in the defeat of the British forces at Yorktown. Slaves who fought were granted freedom after the war, but as he had not fought, he was still a slave on his return. But in 1786, with the support of his enslaver William Armistead, and a testimonial by the Marquis himself, James petitioned the Virginia Assembly for his freedom. On January 9, 1787, the Assembly granted the petition. 6. Bilal Ibn Rabah. Bilal Ibn Rabah was born into slavery around 580 AD in the desert of Arabia. He was an early convert to Islam, and when his enslaver found out, he had him tortured. The torture only ended when Mohammed sent an emissary to purchase and free Bilal from servitude. Bilal quickly became one of the most trusted and loyal companions to the Prophet and accompanied him to Medina, where they built the first mosque. Upon the completion of the mosque, Muhammad asked Bilal to call the faithful to prayer and gave him the words to say. And the call to prayer he made over 1,500 years ago is the very same call to prayer heard coming from mosques across the world today.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
5. Afeni Shakur. Afeni Shakur was born Alice Faye Williams in 1947. At the age of 11, she moved with her mother and sister to New York to escape her abusive father. In 1968, she changed her name to Afeni Shakur and joined the Black Panther Party, becoming a section leader of the Harlem chapter. 1 year later, she and 20 other members of the party were charged with counts of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and conspiracy to bomb buildings. Facing up to 300 years of prison time, Afeni represented herself in court. She said she would be the one serving, not the lawyers. She was not a lawyer, she was a small-framed, impoverished woman representing herself against a team of New York prosecutors. At the time of her arrest and throughout the trial, she was pregnant with her first child. In what was at the time the longest political trial in U.S. history, Afeni cross-examined one of the suspects and made him admit that he and 2 others were undercover agents and that the 3 of them had organized most of the unlawful activities. She and the others in the Panther 21 were acquitted in May 1971, after an 8-month trial. 1 month later, she gave birth to a son, Lesane Parrish Crooks. She later renamed him Tupac Amaru Shakur. He would grow up to become the late rapper Tupac. 4. Joseph Bologne Chevalier de St. George. St. George was the illegitimate son of a wealthy plantation owner and an African slave on Guadeloupe. He was, however, lucky to be acknowledged by his father and was sent to France for an education. He soon became known for his riding and fencing skills, defeating a master at 17 because he racially abused him. In 1792, he joined the French Revolution, enlisting in Europe's first all-black regiment, soon making colonel. His leadership was so successful, his legion was often referred to as Legion St. George, but he was driven out of the army because of his love of music. And his music is arguably his greatest achievement, as the first recognized classical composer of African origins. Double Mozart Noir, or Black Mozart, his known work includes operas, a symphony, concertos, and chamber music. Former U.S. President John Adams called him the most accomplished man in Europe. There is a theory that Mozart, who at the time was struggling, copied his ideas and that his jealousy led to the villain Monostatos in the Magic Flute. 3. William Brown. William Brown was a sailor who was born around 1789 in Grenada and joined the British Royal Navy. There is dispute as to whether Brown joined the Navy earlier than 1815, but Brown was certainly a sailor on HMS Queen Charlotte at the outset of war with France in 1815. In fact, much of Brown's career is disputed because there is little detail. It is possible Brown was only a sailor in 1815 or had a career ranging from 1804 to at least 1816. What is undisputed, though, is that Brown had managed to hide the fact that she was in fact a woman. Sadly, her real name was never recorded, but she was without doubt the first woman to serve in the British Navy. 2. Mary Seacole. The Crimean War made one nurse, Florence Nightingale, famous and a British icon. There was, however, another woman who nursed soldiers in that war that is not as famous. Mary Seacole, a Jamaican-born healer, decided to join the effort to help tend to the wounded and sick in the war. Her help was denied both by the British War Office and Nightingale's contingent of nurses, so she made her own way to Crimea with a partner at their own cost. While Nightingale's hospital was based in today's Istanbul, 340 miles from the battlefield, Seacole built her hospital 4 miles from the action. Her camp served as both a business, where she sold various goods and food, and as a makeshift hospital. Her hospital tended to the wounded and to those sick with disease, which actually killed more soldiers than the war itself. After the war, 40,000 people attended a fundraiser for her, and in 2016 a statue of her was unveiled in the grounds of St. Thomas Hospital on London's South Bank. 1. Nanny of the Maroons. Sometime in the early 18th century, a woman arrived in Jamaica from West Africa. We don't know if she arrived in Jamaica, a slave or a free woman, but it is agreed she was never actually enslaved. Legend says she came from the Akans people in modern-day Ghana and was born in the late 1600s. We do know she made her way into the hilly interior of the island, joining communities of escaped slaves. She turned these communities into an effective fighting force that came to be known as the Maroons. Under her leadership, they fought a long and bloody guerrilla war against the British over 30 years. Her use of guerrilla tactics is considered far ahead of its time. The Maroons had a mastery of camouflage and employed cow horns for long-range communication. In the end, the British were forced to sign a peace treaty that gave the Maroons freedom and land, a century before the abolition of slavery. She is credited with freeing more than 1,000 slaves over the 30 years of war. Known as Nanny of the Maroons or Queen Nanny, the Jamaican government made her a national hero in 1975.